So why is auditor independence such a huge deal? Today, we're diving into this whole concept, a principle that's, well, pretty much the bedrock of trust in the entire financial world. Let's break down what it really means.
Here's the plan. We're going to start with the core principle itself. Then, we'll get into the 5 major threats that can mess it all up. We'll take a look at the unique spot internal auditors are in, walk through a step-by-step way to handle conflicts, and finally, check out how companies can build some serious safeguards.
All right, first things first. What are we actually talking about when we say auditor independence? You know, it's way more than just a corporate buzzword. It's an absolute must-have.
Of course not. The idea is just ridiculous, right? You'd be questioning every single call they make. Well, that's exactly what an auditor is, the referee for a company's finances. And their judgment has to be completely 100% unbiased for anyone to believe the final score.
And that whole referee thing really gets to the heart of the official definition. It's all about shielding an auditor's integrity and their objectivity from any kind of outside pressure. Doesn't matter if it's a hidden bias, a conflict of interest, or someone just trying to influence them, the whole point is to keep the audit clean.
Because look, when that independence gets shaky, the fallout can be really serious. An auditor might just happen to not report a major control breach, or they might ignore some pretty big discrepancies in the numbers. They might even just accept a weak excuse without double-checking. Basically, they stop being a watchdog and can end up enabling some really bad stuff.
Okay, now let's get to the real meat of this topic. The pros have actually broken down all the different pressures that can chip away at an auditor's judgment into 5 main threats. And if you understand these, you can start to see them pop up in the real world. The first one is probably the most obvious. It's the self-interest threat. This happens anytime an auditor could actually benefit financially or in some other way from the client they're supposed to be checking up on. It's that classic, what's in it for me problem.
And you can see how this plays out a little differently for an external auditor versus an internal one. For an external auditor, it could be owning stock in the client's company. Or it could be more subtle, like their firm relies way too much on that one client's fees and they're scared of losing the business. Even the hint of a future job offer can muddy the waters. Now, for an internal auditor, it's often even more direct. Imagine your bonus is tied to how well the department you're auditing does. Yeah, that's a problem.
Okay, next up is the self-review threat. This one's a bit tricky. It's when an auditor has to give an opinion on work that they themselves did in the past. I mean, can you really be objective when you're basically grading your own homework? Probably not.
Just look at these examples. For an external auditor, maybe they used to work for the client. Or maybe their firm actually helped prepare the very financial data they're now supposed to be auditing. For an internal auditor, the classic example is getting transferred out of a department and then a month later being told to go back and audit it. In every single one of these cases, it's a clear conflict.
The third danger is what we call the advocacy threat. This pops up when an auditor starts promoting their client's position so much that their own objectivity just goes out the window. They've stopped being a neutral referee and have basically become a cheerleader for one of the teams.
At this point, the auditor's whole purpose is just compromised. For example, they could be out there promoting the client's stock or acting as their representative in some legal fight. When you're doing that, you are definitely not an independent auditor anymore. You're basically on their team.
All right, threat number 4, familiarity. Now this one is subtle, but it is so powerful, and it just kind of creeps in over time. It happens when a long, close relationship with a client makes an auditor a little too sympathetic, a little too trusting, and that professional skepticism they're supposed to have starts to wear away.
And this can build up in all sorts of ways. For an external auditor, maybe one of their close family members is a director at the client company. Or maybe the same senior auditor has been working with that client for 10 years straight. For an internal auditor, simply working at the same company for years builds friendships that make it really hard to be critical. Even something as simple as accepting a fancy dinner or tickets to a game can start to blur those important lines.
And finally, we have threat number 5, the intimidation threat. This is when an auditor is basically scared away from acting objectively because of threats. And it doesn't matter if those threats are real or just perceived. This is pressure in its rawest, most damaging form.
And the examples here are pretty intense. An external auditor might be told, hey, if you don't agree with us on this, we'll just find a new audit firm. Or you have a really dominant CEO who tries to control the whole relationship. Internally, a manager might drop hints that a good audit report will look great on your next performance review. It's direct, it's coercive, and it just completely destroys the whole point of an audit. Now, while every auditor has to deal with these threats, the situation for internal auditors is, well, a special kind of ethical minefield. They have to walk this incredibly fine line every single day, and the pressures they face are just fundamentally different from what their external colleagues deal with.
And this quote just says it all, doesn't it? Think about it. For an external auditor, losing a client is bad for business. But for an internal auditor, bringing up a really tough issue could impact their next raise, their chance at a promotion, or even whether they have a job next month. The company they are supposed to be objectively auditing is the very same company that signs their paychecks. That's a massive built-in conflict.
So, given all these intense pressures, what's an auditor supposed to do when they find themselves in an ethical bind? Well, thankfully, there's a clear, professional playbook for exactly this situation.
The process is really structured and logical. It's designed to take you from just having information to taking concrete action. You start by getting all the facts and figuring out exactly what the ethical problem is. Then, you go back to the fundamental principles of your profession and follow whatever internal procedures your company has. The final steps are all about exploring your options and, crucially, talking to the right senior people in your firm.
Now, dealing with individual conflicts is absolutely critical, but you know what's even better? Preventing them from happening in the first place. And that means organizations have to build these structural walls of protection to keep their auditors independent.
When it comes down to it, the strongest protection is structural. A lot of these rules are lessons learned the hard way from some of the biggest financial scandals in history. The internal audit team has to be separate from the executives they're overseeing. They can't audit systems they helped build. And this is the big one. The head of internal audit has to report directly to the audit committee of the board, not the CEO or the CFO. That reporting line and having the committee approve who gets hired or fired for that job is the ultimate safeguard.
And all of this brings us to one last thought. We've got principles, we've got safeguards, and we've got procedures. But at the end of the day, auditors are human, and business is all about relationships. So it leaves us with this huge question. In a world where our personal and professional lives get tangled up, can independence ever be truly 100% absolute? That's the challenge that this profession has to wrestle with every single day.